A woman runs out of the house into the middle of the street in fear. She looks around but there is no suspicious person around. Her neighbor offers to help her but she does not accept the offer. Later, her father also appears and asks her what had happened. She then runs around the street and immediately goes into the house to get his car keys. As soon as she takes the key, she starts the car and goes away. She is driving the car aimlessly even though her phone keeps ringing. After a long journey, she stops at a beach in the middle of the night. The phone rings again and she picks it up. She apologizes to her father and says that she loves them even though she often acts too much. She then looks at his car and hears a strange sound. The next day, she is found dead in a pathetic condition. Her face is pale with her broken leg facing an abnormal direction. Then, there's a college student named Jay. She is swimming behind his house until her sister greets her. Her sister said that their friends are visiting their house right now. She also invites Jay to join and watches a movie with them but Jay refuses. Jay said she is going out with someone tonight. After a while, she comes out of the pool and meets Paul and Yara in the living room. After talking for a while, Jay goes up to her room and gets ready for a date. She wears her best dress suit to the decoration on her face. Later that night, she meets a man named Hugh at the cinema. While waiting in line to buy tickets, she invites Hugh to play a game. She asked him to observe the people around him and choose someone he wants to become. After looking around, he manages to find the person he wants to replace. Then, she tries to guess who he chooses but she fails. He then points to a small child while saying the reason. As they sit in the cinema, it is Hugh's turn to guess. Jay immediately looks at the people around them and chooses someone she wants to replace. After that, Hugh tries to guess. When he guesses, he points to a girl in a yellow dress near the exit but Jay couldn't see her. Hugh's face suddenly changes and asks her to get out of the cinema. He keeps looking behind even though there is no one behind him. Jay asks him about the things but he keeps saying that there is nothing and he is just feeling nauseous in there. Departing from the cinema, they continue to eat at a restaurant. There, they talk until the end of the night. The next day, Jay and his sister walk alone around their house. They discuss her date last night with Hugh. Jay says that it was great but she thinks there is something strange about Hugh. They talk until they arrive in front of their house. The next evening, Jay meets with Hugh again. This time, the two of them walk through the forest until they arrive at the edge of the river. When they get there, they sit down talking and start kissing. They then go back to the car and have sex. After finishing, Hugh gets out of the car and opens the trunk of his car. Jay was lying in the back seat facing one of the doors, telling her imaginary love story. After a while, Hugh gets back into the car from the opposite direction of Jay. He seemed to want to hug her but suddenly he covers Jay's face with a cloth. She tries to fight back and asks for help but there is nothing she can do. She faints after a while of fighting back. She wakes up tied to a wheelchair in a ruined building. As she tries to free himself, she sees Hugh scanning the surrounding room with a flashlight like he is looking for something. She questions what he does to her but Hugh promises that he will not hurt her. After that, he tells about a curse. He says that something will follow her. It can take many forms and will follow the curse holder wherever they go. The only way to survive is to transfer the curse to someone else by having sex. Hugh also admits that he transfers his curse to Jay. Jay, who still can't believe it again, tries to free herself. Suddenly, Hugh runs to one place and says it is already here. He then pushes the wheelchair into a gap in the building. There, Jay sees a naked woman walking towards her. Hugh once again asks Jay to pass the curse on to someone else so she can survive. He even runs toward the object and proves that it does not care about Hugh, who is previously cursed. This happens because the curse has been transferred to Jay and it is chasing Jay now. Immediately, Hugh takes Jay outside and drives her home. She arrives home in a very traumatized state. There she meets her sister and friends. After a few steps, she falls to the ground and her friends immediately call the police. Moments later, the police come to interview her and ask her a few questions. After further investigation by the police, no trace of Hugh is found and Hugh's house is also rented with a fake name. A few days after that, Jay, who has improved a little, attends her class. She cannot focus and turns her gaze to the window. She sees an old woman walking towards her. Jay is scared and immediately leaves the classroom. She looks around the corridor and she comes face to face with the entity. Without thinking, she immediately gets out of the building and drives to meet her sister. When she gets there, she tells her sister and friend about it but no one believes her. Desperately, Jay asks Paul to stay at her house to stay awake at night. That night, Jay cannot sleep and decides to join Jay, who is watching a movie in the living room. While they are busy talking about their past, they hear a sound of a window breaking. Paul immediately checks in the direction of the voice but no one is there. He then decides to go upstairs and woke Jay's sister and her friend up. Curious, Jay slowly walks in the direction of the voice. There she is surprised to find a half-naked woman walking toward her. She ran as fast as she can to her room and locks it. After a while, Paul and her sister enter the room and find Jay, who is scared. Suddenly, another voice comes from outside Jay's door. Paul immediately takes a broom and opens the door, and it is Yara, who knocked earlier. However, suddenly a tall male figure appears behind Yara's back and chases Jay. Spontaneously, Jay gets out of the balcony of her room and flees on a bicycle. She pedals briskly towards the park. Her sister and friends follow her there and ask her to calm down. Here, they meet Greg, Jay's classmate. After Jay retells everything that happened, they decide to find Hugh. The next day, they arrive at Hugh's house, a broken house that had been neglected. They begin to search every corner of the house until Paul finds a pile of adult magazines. In the magazine, he finds a photo of Hugh with his friend in school uniforms. With these clues, Greg and Jay immediately head to Hugh's school. There, they learn Hugh's real name is Jeff and the address where he lives. Without lingering, they soon arrive at Jeff's house. There, Jeff tells them everything. Jeff tells how he ends up with the curse. He gets the curse while he was at the bar for a one-night stand. He says that the curse can never be lost and can only be transferred to another person. However, even if the curse has been removed, he will still be able to see the entity. If the curse holder dies, the entity will follow the previous curse holder until the person who starts the curse first. Jeff also says that the entity can only be seen by curse holders and cannot be seen by his friends. He again reminds Jay to immediately transfer the curse to someone else. Jay's friends still cannot believe what Jeff is talking about and ask her to leave. When they are about to go home, Greg invites them to go to one of his houses. After a long journey, they arrive at Greg's house. Arriving there, Jay's sister cooks dinner while Jay immediately hangs up something noisy on doors and windows. This is done in order to find out whether the entity enters the house or not. That night, nothing happens, a quiet home atmosphere with Jay, who is sleeping soundly. The next day, Greg walks to the warehouse right behind his house. There, he takes a gun for Jay. After that, he teaches Jay how to hold a gun and how to shoot. She earnestly practices using the gun. In the afternoon, Yara is seen swimming on the beach behind Greg's house, while the others are relaxing and sitting on the beach. Greg stands up from his seat and immediately heads for the bushes to pee. Unknowingly, the entity appears with the appearance of a woman and walks towards Jay from behind. Jay, who has not realized, still looks at Yara, who is swimming on the beach. Suddenly, Jay's hair rises and immediately she screams. Paul immediately slams the chair at the entity even though she cannot see it. However, the chair shatters and he is hit and bounces into the sand. Jay and her friends immediately run towards the warehouse and take the gun there. She shoots at the figure and hits it, but the entity stands back up and keeps chasing her. She immediately locks the barn door so that the entity does not enter. Greg does not know what is happening and tries to open the door. He smashes the bottom door so a hole big enough for a small child to enter appears. Greg's voice suddenly disappears and raises Jay's curiosity. Jay, who is worried for Greg, heads toward the hole. Suddenly, the entity transforms into a child and enters through the hole. Jay stands up and quickly runs through the door at the back. Regardless of his friends, she starts the car and escapes from there. Because she was not careful, she does not realize that another car is about to move too. She lost her way and entered the local farmer's cornfield. Jay suffers a wound to his head and faints. When she wakes up, she is already in the hospital. There, her friends and mother wait for her to wake up. Then, she looks around and hears footsteps coming from her bedroom door. She stared at the door holding back tears, but luckily the sound of footsteps came from a nurse. She is relieved and looks at Greg, who suddenly wakes up. At night, she resignedly has sex with Greg. She hopes that Greg can help her by removing the curse and passing it on to him. After the curse is transferred to Greg, Greg seems unconcerned about it. He is still playing with his friends as if nothing has happened. On the other hand, Paul is heartbroken after finding out that Jay was with Greg. One night, Jay looks out the window to see Greg walking down the street to his house. When he gets to his window, he breaks it and enters. Jay then figures out that the entity has taken the appearance of Greg. Jay runs over to the house and peeks inside to see the entity taking on the appearance of Greg's mom. Jay then tries to warn Greg, who is on the telephone. The entity jumps on top of Greg and kills him. Now, the curse has reverted back to Jay, who flees to the woods. When she wakes up in the morning, Jay is near a beach and spots 3 young men on a boat. Suddenly an idea comes to her mind and she undresses immediately. Then, she goes into the water hoping that she can sleep with one of the men and can pass on the curse to buy herself more time. After she goes back home, she meets Paul. Paul wants to sleep with Jay, but she rejects him since she does not want him to be killed. Paul then comes up with a plan to kill the entity. They go to a deserted swimming pool outside the city in hopes of luring the entity into the water and then electrocuting it. Jay will be the bait and gets into the pool. After a long wait, she finally spots it. It has taken on the appearance of her father and stands there for a few moments. But he has figured out the plan and starts throwing electrical devices into the water to kill Jay. Since they cannot see the entity, Paul fires blindly to try to kill it. In the ensuing chaos, Paul accidentally wounds Yara on her feet. Then, he shoots the entity in the head, which supposedly kills the entity. To make sure if it is dead or not, Jay looks inside the pool but she cannot see anything. The pool is filled with blood and covers all the water. After heading home, Paul and Jay finally start a relationship. They finally accept each other and have sex. Paul then drives to a rundown part of Detroit where there are prostitutes walking the street. This time, Paul wants to pass the curse on to some of the prostitutes there. Sometime later, Jay and Paul are walking down the street hand in hand. They are talking with each other while walking down the street. But what they do not know, the entity is still following them from behind. The moral of this movie is that we should be careful in doing these adult actions so that later things don't happen that are not desirable. Subscribe to watch more videos like this, turn on notifications, and leave a like and comment to help the channel out. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.